Hello again, and welcome to this video on Chapter 14, Ergonomic Assessments. And in this video, we're going to cover some things that haven't been talked about in the other multitude of videos that you've got in this pretty long module. So we're going to get going on it right now. And get started. All right, Chapter 14. This PowerPoint will cover the assessments not covered elsewhere. So there's not going to be any big, long assessments in here. So Liberty Mutual Manual Materials Handling Guideline, that's touched on. Physical Risk Factor Checklist, the NavInst, mimic chart, and the Wishy calculator for analyzed lifting operations will all be looked at. Goals of this tool are to give you some objective risk assessment of manually handling tasks such as lift, lower, push, pull, and carrying, and controlling a cost associated with manual handling tasks. Now, this is Liberty Mutual. Why would Liberty Mutual want to do this? What is Liberty Mutual? Well, Liberty Mutual is an insurance company, a big insurance company. So why would they want to do things like this? Because if people don't get hurt, they don't pay out claims. If they don't pay out claims, guess what? They make more money. So it makes sense for them to do this. There's a series of tables entitled Mill Population Percentages for Lifting Tasks ending below knuckle height, which are considered 31 inches. 30 inches is about the height of a desk. A normal desk is about 30 inches high. They vary a little bit, but that's about 30 inches high. And these are based on psychophysical research. The worker was given control of the weight of the object being handled, and all other variables, frequency, size, height, distance, etc., are controlled by the researcher. The worker monitors his or her feelings of exertion or fatigue and adjusts the weight of the object accordingly. The psychophysical methodology included measurement of O2 consumption, not CO2 consumption, heart rate, and anthropometrics. The theory was to design manual material handling for greater than 75% of the female work population, so it will offer protection from manual handling injuries. Tasks that have a population percentage of 10%, only capable by less than 10% of the population, are most likely going to lead to injury. Tables can be used to perform what-if scenarios. They are relatively simple to use and are recommended for moderate frequency tasks. There are some limitations to the tables. They do not address injuries, frequent bending or twisting, frequent reaching and reaching away from the body, one-handed lifts, or catching and throwing items, which happens sometimes. And that was just a touch on that. We didn't get any details. Now we're going to look at the risk factor checklist, the NavInst. This is Operations Navy Institution or something like that. It's Navy. This checklist examines individual body areas for risk based on posture, force, duration, and frequency. Geez, where have we heard those terms before? We're going to start by identifying the ergonomic stressors, either through direct observations or watching a video playback. It's used for typical work activities that are regular and foreseeable part of the job. It's simple in its design and has drawings as examples of the activities that may be a hazard. For each category, determine whether the physical risk factor rates as a caution or a hazard and check the appropriate box. Mark NA if not applicable. Make comments as needed in the space provided. So this is kind of what I like about this. This is kind of a checklist. And I'm going to have to read this thing. I'm going to have to put my specs on. The physical risk factor ergonomic checklist can be used as a screening tool to identify ergonomic stressors in the workplace. For each category, determine whether the physical risk factor rates as a caution or hazard by placing a check in the appropriate box. Risk of developing a work-related musculoskeletal disorder is increased when ergonomic risk factors occur in combination. We all know that, of course. If a hazard exists, it must be reduced below the hazard level or to the degree technologically and economically feasible. If a task rates a caution, then it should be periodically reevaluated since changes in the work environment may create new ergonomic stressors. Ensure significant contributing physical or personal risk factors are not present. The checklist can be used for typical work activities which are regular and foreseeable part of the job, occurring more than 1 day per week and more frequently than 1 week per year. And then this is just the header, the evaluator, etc. That's the first page of it there. And this one is going to look at awkward posture. This is kind of neat because they give you a little bit of a drawing there and a description. And this particular one is number 1, working with the hands above the head or the elbows above the shoulders. We both know those are risk factors. The caution would be more than 2 hours a day. And if it's more than 4 hours per day, it rates a hazard. Number 2, repeatedly raising the hands above the head or the elbows above the shoulders more than once per minute. There's no caution on this one, but it's a hazard if it's more than 4 hours per day. 3, working with the neck bent without support and without the ability to vary posture. You can see some of their look like they're either polishing or grinding something there. The caution is more than 30 degrees for more than 2 hours a day, and hazard more than 30 degrees for more than 4 hours per day, or more than 45 degrees more than 2 hours per day. Well, that guy there's got pretty good billing, so I'm guessing he's got more than 45 days, 45 angles, 45 degrees on the angle. Number 4, working with the back bent forward without support, without the ability to vary posture. More than 30 degrees for more than 2 hours a day is a caution. More than 30 degrees for more than 4 hours total per day, or more than 45 degrees more than 2 hours per day total is a hazard. And that makes pretty good sense. Squatting more than 2 hours a day or more than 4 hours a day is the caution and the hazard there. Kneeling more than 2 hours a day or more than is a caution, and more than 4 hours per day is a hazard. Pinching an unsupported object weighing 2 or more pounds per hand, or pinching with a force of 4 or more pounds per hand. That's a lot of grip for something that's even 2 pounds with your 2 fingers to hold up. And more than 2 hours per day, comparable to pitching half a ream of paper, or the force required to open 2 wooden clothespins. Anybody ever know what a clothespin is? Hazard, more than 4 hours per day with no other risk factors, or more than 3 hours day with highly repetitive motion, or more than 3 hours per day with significant wrist deviation, inflection, extension, or ulnar deviation. And they give you the pictures over there where they're talking about for extension, flexion, and deviation. Number 8, gripping an unsupported object weighing 10 or more pounds per hand, or gripping with a force of 10 or more pounds per hand. More than 2, if it's caution, if it's more than 2 hours total per day, comparable to clamping light-duty automotive jumper cables to a battery. It's a hazard if it's more than 4 hours per day with no other risk factors, or more than 3 hours per day with highly repetitive motion, or more than 3 hours per day with significant wrist deviation and flexion. Number 9, repeating the same motion with the neck, shoulders, elbows, wrists, or hands, excluding keying activities with little or no variation every few seconds. So excluding the sitting down and keying into a computer. Caution is more than 2 hours per day. Hazard more than 6 hours per day with no other risk factors, or more than 2 hours per day with wrists bent, again, with flexion, extension, or ulnar deviation greater than 30 degrees, and high forceful exertion of the hands. So there are a lot of caveats in that one. Number 10, performing intensive keying. Caution, more than 4 hours total per day. And then the hazard, either more than 7 hours per day with no other risk factors, or more than 4 hours per day with wrist bent, inflection, extension, or ulnar deviation. And 11, using the hand, heel base, or palm or knee as a hammer. Caution, more than 10 times per hour, more than 2 hours total per day. It's a hazard if it's more than once per minute, more than 2 hours total per day. So heavy, frequent, or awkward lifting, a lifting object, heavy, like the manhole cover there. Caution, weighing more than 75 pounds once per day, or more than 55 pounds, or more than 10 times per day. So 55 pounds once a day, or 55 pounds 10 times per day. For exposures that exceed caution level, perform lift analysis using the NIOSH lifting equation or the current lifting index and the ACGIH TLV guide. There you go. They're referring to the lifting equation or the ACGIH TLV guide, which we will cover in this chapter too, if we haven't already. 13, lifting objects frequent. Weighing more than, it's a caution, weighing more than 10 pounds if done more than twice per minute, or more than 2 hours per day. And it's a hazard for exposure that exceed caution levels, perform lift analysis. There we go. Going back to the NIOSH lifting equation, which they're going to do in the next one too. 14, lifting awkward postures. And you can see tires in those racks, and getting them up there is an awkward posture to do that. Caution, objects weighing more than 25 pounds above the shoulders, below the knees, or at arm's length, or more than 25 times per day. It's a hazard, again, for exposures that exceed caution level. I want you to do a NIOSH lifting equation. And they're monitor high hand-arm vibration. They're seeing on the picture there, there's an impact wrench on tires. They're using impact or percussive type tools such as impact wrenches, carpet strippers, chainsaws, percussive tools like jackhammers, scalers, riveting or chipping hammers, or other tools that typically have high vibration levels. It's a caution of more than 30 minutes total per day, and they want you to, for exposures that exceed caution levels of more than 30 minutes per day, perform analysis using hand-arm vibration tool guide and the ACGIHTLV guide. So they want to pass you off to somebody else. 16, using grinders, sanders, jigsaws, or other hand tools that typically have moderate vibration levels. Caution more than 2 hours per day and a hazard. And they're going to, again, refer you to the ACGIHTLV guide for that. Also, they're going to bring up extension or inflection of the wrist, so that checklist was taken by Opnavins. This is the number, chapter 23, and these pages, 469 pages in that manual. Aren't you glad we didn't have to go through all of them? If a hazard exists, it must be reduced below the hazard level or to the degree technologically and economically feasible. Ensure the workers at the hazard level have received general ergonomics training and provide refresher training if possible. If a task rates a caution, reevaluate at least annually, since changes may create new ergonomic stressors. Also, reduce as much as feasible contributing risk factors, which include temperature extremes, inadequate recovery time, and stress on the job. Also consider personal contributing factors, which include age, obesity, arthritis or diabetes, or pre-existing conditions such as fractures, strains, trigger finger carpal tunnel syndrome. Now, I came across this little thing just while doing some research, and it's by MEMIC. MEMIC is a workers' compensation insurer, and this little chart here is just a real simple chart. There's this guy's lifting 50 pounds, he's carrying, and as you'll see throughout ergonomics, 50 pounds seems to be some kind of a standard. Some companies require lifting anything over 50 pounds with 2 people, and that's not a bad idea. But again, even depending on the person, 6'5", 300-pound guy could probably lift 50 pounds pretty easy, but certainly somebody much smaller than that might not be. So, and they're giving you a green zone and a yellow zone and a red zone. And of course, you see the danger zone is above the shoulders and below the knees for everything. So it's just a pretty simple guide, that's all. And it's pretty self-explanatory. And it has 3 zones: green, safe lifting; yellow, limited weights, possible problems; and red or danger zones. If repeated lifting is done in these zones, there's cause for alarm and action. I would think so. What's about this chart is good? Well, it's simple and easy to use. It's not so good. Well, the floor is 0, is at the ankles. It doesn't take into account the person's height, strength, etc. So again, it's just a general guide. Now, the calculator for analyzing lifting operations is very easy to use. This is from WSHA. That's a Washington State something. I don't know. It is real simple to use. For that reason, I'm going to let this move my head over here. And we're going to go over it real quickly here. First, end the way the object being lifted. Now, this is different than the NIOSH lifting equation, where you start with the 51 pounds as a constant. Here, you're going to actually put the weight in here of whatever is the object in question is being lifted. And then you're going to get down here, and you're going to just circle one of these numbers and one of the rectangles. It corresponds to the position of the person's hands when they begin to lift or lower the object. As you can see in here, the one that's closest to the person and between the knee and the belt buckle has a 90 in it. Okay, that's the highest number on this chart. So you want to circle that number, the one number that corresponds to this. At the bottom, there's a little scale there. It says 0, 7 inches, 12 inches, and then further than 12 inches. Obviously, the further away from your body they're picking it up, the more stress it is on you. So it makes a lot of sense. So far now you've done two things. That's all. And the next thing is, what's the frequency? How many lifts per hour? How many hours per day? Excuse me, how many lifts per minute? So the left column is one lift every 2 to 5 minutes, every minute, 2 to 3 lifts every minute, all the way down to 10 plus lifts every minute. And then how many hours per day? 1 hour or less, 1 to 2, or 2 or more hours. So if it's 2 or more hours and it's 4 to 5 lifts a minute, you're going to have a factor, the number 0.45. And then you're going to circle the 0.45. Again, the instructions at the top say circle the number that corresponds to the times the person lifts per minute and the total number of hours spent lifting. Now, the next one is circle the 08 if the person twists more than 45 degrees while lifting. So no measurements here. It's pretty simple. 45 degrees is pretty easy to estimate. 90 degrees, of course, you know what that is, and half of that's 45 degrees. So if the person, anytime during that lift, twists more than 45 degrees, then you're going to circle 0.85. Otherwise, circle 1, which in a multiplication, 1 really doesn't mean anything. But that's what they want you to do. Now, I want you to, after you've done that, you're going to circle either one of those numbers, not both of them, just one of them. And then you want to copy the numbers you've circled in steps 2, 3, and 4, not the number 1, the weight lifted, in 2, 3, and 4. So in other words, if you started off, let's say in the middle at 8 inches away and Nita weighs 55 pounds, and then the lifting was 1 every 2 to 5 minutes, you'd have a 1, of course, there. And if there was no twisting, you'd have a 1 there, and you'd end up with 55. So, but probably the lift's going to be a little higher than that. Let's just say you had the 90 pound, but you were lifting at 8 or 9 lifts a minute, 1 hour less. That'd be 0.6. So at 90 pound times 0.6 is 54. And 1, if there's no twisting, so you have a 54 there. And then you just want to compare this. Now you're going to get a lifting limit, they're calling it. To do the math, all you do is multiply these 3 numbers and write that in the box lifting limit. So obviously, if you have a 1, it doesn't mean anything in multiplication, it's the same thing. So multiply these 3 numbers and write that in the box lifting limit. So you're going to take the number that's in the chart and the frequency, duration chart there, and then the twisting. So only 3 factors being considered. And is the weight lifted in step 1 less than the lifting limit? So now you're going to compare that to the very first thing you put in there, the weight lifted in step 1. And that's the only comparison you're going to do there. So you can see that's pretty simple to use. And yes is okay, and no is a hazard. So you can see that the theory behind this and the NIOSH lifting equation are very similar. This one just uses 3 things: where the lifts begin, which is the start turning number, then frequency and twists are factors that will most likely reduce that number. So not much different from the NIOSH lifting equation. And there's your good old hierarchy of controls. So whenever you have some issues, you need to do controls, you're going to try to see if you can physically remove the hazard, or substitute by replacing the hazard, or engineering controls which isolate people from the hazard, or administrative controls which change the way people work, or if all else fails, PPE, protect the worker. So ergonomic assessments, a summary of exposure risk factors, can be evaluated using many methods, and no one method is correct in all situations. That's why there's a whole bunch of different ones. And so the methods we kind of covered was the ACGIH, American Conference of Government Industrial Hygienists, DOV for lifting, and its limitations are based on what a worker feels they can tolerate, assumes good coupling, two-handed handling, unrestricted posture, less than 30 degrees of twisting, and task cannot exceed 8 hours a day or 360 lifts per shift. And again, a lot of these have caveats on them because it's not just one size fits all when it comes to ergonomics. We covered the Liberty Mutual Manual Handling Guide, Manual Materials Handling Guide, only considers population percentages and doesn't just address injuries, bending or twisting, frequent reaching or one-handed lifts or coupling or any of that stuff. Physical risk factor checklists used for work activities that are regular and foreseeable part of the job, occurring more than once a day per week and more than 1 week per year. And the ACGIH, American Conference of Government Industrial Hygienists, here they are again. TLV for hand activity, limitations most valuable for jobs with repeatable steps that involve a similar set of motions or exertion repeatedly for 4 hours a day or more. RULA, rapid upper limb assessment, and REBA, rapid entire body assessment. Their limitation requires rating posture that could differ from worker to worker or even by the same worker. The MIL standard 1472 FF, human engineering design criteria for military, and its limitations are intended for the design of a new system and intended to be used for infrequent lifting. The NIOSH lifting equation. We covered this a good bit, or if you haven't seen it, done it, so yeah, you will. It assumes one person whose stature is not taken into account, lifting is two-handed and smooth, and load is evenly distributed. This seems to be, and there's no such thing, but it's the gold standard in lifting in ergonomics. That seems whatever, even as the MIL standard did, or as the OPNAVINS did, referred them to this. So this is one of those things. It's probably one of those go-to assessments. So now, this is a little checklist, ergonomic checklist, if you wanted to do an ergonomic assessment in general. And you would get down, if this is done for a shop, so that's why it says shop in here. I don't know where I ran across this, but it's kind of nice. And it assumes either maybe you're a consultant or maybe you're new to someplace or whatever. So you're going to go and you're going to ask some questions. Has any shop worker been previously diagnosed with any of the following? And the following CTDs: continuous trauma disorders, carpal tunnel, tendonitis, tenosynovitis, Baker-Veins disease, trigger finger, white finger, hand arm segmental vibration, that's HAV syndrome, muscle strains, or back ailments. And in the two columns you can't see because my head's in the way, there you go, are just yes and no on the right hand side there. You call me yes, you put a check in one of those columns. But that's question number one. Question number two: have there been any worker complaints concerning ergonomic issues? Yes or no? Do employees perform high repetition tasks, 100 reps per hour to 2,000 reps per day? 100 reps per hour is a lot. So, but do employees do that? And that's a good ergonomics question too. Getting like a very basic ergonomic principle. Do the employees routine tasks require repeated heavy lifting over 20 pounds or occasional heavy lifting over 50 pounds? So it doesn't give you what repeated and occasional means, but that's general, probably for a good reason. Are employees using awkwardly designed tools which cause the worker to operate the tool outside of a neutral posture for an extended period of time? And you all see pictures of the tools that are made for or vertical or horizontal, pistol grip tools for something that's horizontal, a straight tool for something that's vertical. So that's what they're talking about there, those type of things there. Do employees perform tasks with an awkward head or neck position for an extended period of time? That's one of those things that's pretty easy to see when you're walking through a plant. Do employees perform tasks that require awkward back angles to be held for extended periods of time, 2 to 3 hours, hunching, bending, or squatting? Do employees perform tasks with an awkward elbow angle for an extended period of time, 1 to 3 hours, or with extreme force application? Awkward elbow angle. Do employees perform tasks with an awkward elbow abduction angle for an extended period of time, 1 to 3 hours, or with extreme force application? 10, do employees perform tasks with an awkward wrist flexion angle for an extended period of time, 1 to 3 hours, or with extreme force application? Notice that either one of those, 1 to 3 hours or extreme force, becomes pretty serious possible problem. 11, do employees perform tasks with an awkward wrist extension angle for an extended period of time, 1 to 3 hours, or with extreme force application? 12, do employees perform tasks with an awkward back hip flexion angle for an extended period of time, 1 to 3 hours, or with extreme force application? Do employees perform tasks with an extreme reaching distance for an extended period of time, 1 to 3 hours, or with extreme force application? Do employees perform tasks with an odd workstation height, either standing or sitting, for an extended period of time, 1 to 3 hours, or with extreme force application? Workstation height is very important. Are high impact tools used frequently? Riveters, bucking bars, or impact wrenches? Are high vibration producing tools used routinely? Now, it doesn't say, now this one says, yeah, okay, routinely, both say routinely. Die grinders, sanders, weed eaters, even. Do employees perform tasks at extreme height, high or low, for an extended period of time, or with extreme force application? I don't think they're talking about the height off the ground. I think they're talking about, the tasks that are up here or down. Are there any other areas of concern, either from your observations or employee complaints? There's your general duty clause type of thing. Catch all for anything else. And then down at the bottom, it says note on the left-hand side, if there's a yes checked in any block, please use page 2 to give a brief explanation of what the activity is or what the worker complaint was. And then on the right-hand side, it says there's 3 paragraphs here. High risk. If you answered yes to number 1, and my parentheses there, which was previous injuries, and the shop has done nothing to fix it. If yes to number 2 or 3, and 2 other yeses in 4 through 15, or if yes to 6 or more in number 4 through 15, a little confusing. There's a high risk. So if you answered yes to number 1 and they haven't done anything about it, there's been complaints, and yes to number 2 or 3, ergo complaints or high repetition tasks, and 2 other yeses in 4 through 15, or disregarding all that, if yes to 6 or more in number 4 through 15. So it's either or of those. It's a little confusing, but if you do that, then they're calling it a high risk. Medium risk, if you answered yes to number 1, previous injuries, and the shop has made changes, or if yes to number 2, ergo complaints, or number 3, high repetition tasks, and 1 other yes in 4 through 15, or forgetting all that other stuff, if yes to 3 to 5 yeses in 4 through 15, then you have a medium risk. Now, if there's no yeses in number 1, 2, or 3, and less than 3 yeses in 4 through 15, then they're calling it a low risk. But even if some of those things you might want to look into. But this is a pretty straightforward and simple checklist. And second page is to make notes on anything answered yes on page 1, which makes a lot of sense. And then the final page is to guide to awkward postures. Just give me an idea what you're talking about here. So maybe you're talking to somebody, you can show them what their posture is on this picture. So on this diagram. Then again, that's a pretty simple, just do an ergonomic survey of something and checklist to see how they're doing. Not a bad idea. So that's all for this segment. Take care and be safe.